I say unto you, whosoever committeth sin is the servant of sin, and the servant abideth not in the house forever, but the Son abideth forever. If the Son therefore shall make you free, ye shall be free indeed. I know that ye are Abraham's seed, but ye seek to kill me, because my word hath no place in you. I speak that which I have seen with my Father, and ye do that which ye have seen with your father. They answered and said,
Hello, good morning. Welcome to Line by Line Bible Studies. Continuing Ephesians chapter 4, verse 18, or did that say 16? Yeah, it did. And that's right. So again, we'd covered 14 very thoroughly in terms of growing up and not being so easily swayed back and forth with doctrine. At the same time, you never want to become someone who's just so set in their ways that they can't change their mind because it is their ways. And that was the scribes and Pharisees. They were just so set in their ways that because it was their ways. And it seems, and it's part of what makes Christianity so confusing, honestly, to many people. The fact that we have so many denominations. So many versions of Christianity. And it does beg the question, if any one of them is right, why are there so many other ones? It's also the potential that none of them are right. And that's probably the most, as far as none of them knows everything. None of them has everything exactly right. Otherwise, some people are splitting off from a particular denomination because they've adopted some sort of heretical belief. Other people are splitting off because they've discovered some sort of heretical belief. And sorting that all out, I'm sure each person who is deeply steeped in their own denomination feels that their denomination is the right one. Yet, how do you tell? And it's like, and what from my perspective, is I know that I have much to learn, and also that, for me, like to say then, eventually I've got to create an organization that will carry my legacy forward, blah, blah, blah. And they can call stringeniism. It's the most, just rolls off the tongue, doesn't it? And, so, they could call it after my name. So for some, it'll be the error of stringeniism, and then others, it'll be the truth behind. It's no use, because as soon as you try to fasten it in place, when we talk about knowing God, we're knowing, we should be able to get doctrine right. I admit, we should be able to get doctrine right. I've never, I think most denominations have a lot of things right, but there's structural problems. That's the thing, is that you can have all the right doctrines, really, and still have structural issues that lead to corruption. You can have all the correct doctrines, but have ungifted, uninspired teachers. And you can have everything, all your doctrines, you can have a lot of things right and still have everything wrong. That's another problem with denominations. It's mostly because the hierarchical structure does not guarantee God's inspiration, because God doesn't choose things the way men do. And that was seen in the choosing of David. He was the 8th son. And they went through all the sons of David. They were big, strong. They looked. Isn't this one perfect? He's a king standing right there, but it was not the one the Lord had chosen. And they went down to the boy David, and he was the one God had chosen to be king. God chooses after his own heart, and not after what men like. Well, this guy is, And the funny thing is, you gotta be careful. Even in the scriptures, though, it qualifies service, and I often talk about it. I think a lot of pastors aren't qualified, but I don't want to turn that into. And I've never probably said this before, but that even itself should not be taken as a legalistic approach. But, if someone's going to be put into service who doesn't really qualify, there ought to be exceptional reasons. Not just, we don't care about that qualification anymore. Because so often when they, I remember there's been many stories of where they put novices in charge and it just goes wrong. And they do this a lot, even with kids. They pressure them into leading ministries and outreaches, and they're just kids. They have no business in this, but they're so anxious to go about the business of winning souls that they don't care how they're won or what the result is. I don't know. Anyways, let's move on. Speaking the truth in love may grow up into him in all things, which is the head, even Christ. That's a clause that's leading into the next verse where we're picking up. We want to grow up to him in all things. I've been discussing that for 2 days as a subtext. We'll continue to discuss it. It's part of being born again. You're born again, you need to then grow up. It's part of walking worthy of the calling, as verse 1 of chapter 4. That's what Paul's beseeching you to do. I try not to make it like a. People are like, well, is it required for salvation? Requirements and minimum. People always think in terms of like high school requirements. I need so many credits to graduate. It's not like that with the Lord. You're saved by grace through faith. And now I beseech you, walk worthy of the calling. I can show you some examples of people who didn't, and it didn't turn out well for them. Doesn't mean you can't make mistakes. Look at the Apostle Peter. But the Lord is merciful, but he's not to be trifled with. And don't take it for granted. Don't treat him like an unclean thing. Don't think that he can be gamed. Those who think they can game God are going to be very badly disappointed. From whom the whole body, fitly joined together and compacted by that which every joint supplieth, according to the effectual working in the measure of every part, making increase of the body unto the edifying of itself in love. So again, Christ being the head, the whole body proceeding from him is joined together in the proper way. I'm pretty sure, I could look at these words up. Fitly joined together. Fitly means appropriately, almost certainly. But that's mostly a guess because whatever, because I haven't looked it up. And compacted probably doesn't mean, like, I think compacted like a trash compactor, squeezing everything together uncomfortably. But it probably means more like, stuck together in the sense of adhering to each other, right? But let's look at those words really quick, because that's just my guess. I don't know if it's significant, but I want to make sure when I emphasize these things, I don't emphasize a misunderstanding. Though it can be the right misunderstanding. I've said that before. I can misunderstand things and still tell you the truth. People do it all the time. Because maybe it's not what this verse means, but that doesn't mean that what I'm saying isn't true. But we want to understand these verses first and foremost. So 16. Fitly joined together. That just means to fit together. Okay. The word fit, I assumed fit was going to be an actual adverb. But it's not. It's part of this one word. Soon armologeo. It's got logic in there. It's got soon in there. Compacted. Sum babazo. Joined together. Okay. Yeah, it means joined together. I mean, interesting. Epicorgia. Supply. Effectual working being one word again. Edifying being okradome as before. Okay. Nobody else surprises. But once again, the King James often gets us a little bit, it's a little more verbose perhaps in the Greek. Because, fitted together is one word in Greek. We do have fancy English words which also encompass the idea of fitting together with a single word. Like constructed or something like that. And the whole body constructed and compacted. Well, they used compacted to get one word out of it. Joined together, fit together. Means things are fitted together as they should. Everything is operating as it should in the body, believe it or not. In God's church, as he sees his called out assembly of believers, his elect, looking down from the head, everything is actually operating according as he wants it to. Our sense that the church is split is based on our trying to assemble structures to mimic the heavenly structure. You know what I mean? The Catholic, as Martin Luther, I believe it was Martin Luther. Maybe it was one of the other reformers of the Catholic Church. Those, as they said, as one of them said, anyways, right? If the Pope is the head of the church, then Christ were a two-headed monster, or something of that nature. I don't know if that was Martin Luther. And it's because they constructed a lot of other denominations don't have a single head like that. But the thing is, they do have a council that heads up the church, or a board of directors. There is some sort of leadership that culminates in an ultimate decision-making body. That's how denominations corrupt themselves. A lot of mainstream denominations, including the Lutherans, right? And if you're a conservative Lutheran, you know this is true. You know what I mean? You know that there are a lot of liberal Lutheran churches, and that even the main body of it, as far as the whatever, there's not one Lutheran church anymore. They've split, just like they have the Baptist, the Southern Baptist, the Anabaptist. That may be an old. I think the original were called Anabaptists, to mean the rebaptizers. And the sea-baptizers, that meant the self-baptizers. And then there was but there's a Seventh-day Baptizers. I know the Seventh-day Baptists exists. The Baptists with Seventh-day focus. Excellent. Anyways, so, there's all these, they're all having problems, but you know what? The Lord has no problem. Everything is fit together and joined together appropriately, at least according as he sees fit. We may not be able to see the organizational structure, but it's working. And if you think about it, the church has worked. It's like maybe the local assemblies and earthly structures, as they've been organized by men, have their failings and flaws. And it's like, but God isn't taking responsibility for the Catholic hierarchy. He's taking responsibility for his believers. Now, sometimes people in leadership positions in those denominations are in leadership positions in God's actual church. You know what I mean? Like, they are also considered part of this. I'm not excluding people who belong to denominations from the real church, if you understand. I just realized that that could be a way that someone might take this. I'm not excluding them from it. I'm just saying the structure to which they are answering to is not the head, ultimately. And in that, and it's a big problem in the world as far as, I don't know. I'm not a reformer, I have no answer to the problem as far as I nobody's asking me the question, you know what I mean? So it's like I'm not really that concerned about it, since the Lord, hasn't given me to reform churches, but to teach Bible studies. That's what I do. If I was more involved with denominations and maybe a pastor in one, maybe I'd think about that stuff. Maybe that's something for someone in those roles to think about. It's not something I'm going to fret myself over, because I have no portion with them as far as that goes, as I don't have any fixing that stuff or making it more receptive to God, to the leading of the Holy Spirit. Because what happens is these structures become, over time, they become calcified, they become hardened. And God needs to send prophets and stuff to speak against it, just like what the Catholic Church had to be reformed. The reformers in their time were the prophets of their time. The problem was afterwards, the people, in my mind, just took that as they fixed everything, and they set them up as something even worse. You know what I mean? Like the Pope, we change popes every so often. I mean, growing up, I remember when Pope John Paul became Pope, because my grandfather suddenly got a lot more Catholic because he was Polish and very proud. And now that the Pope was Catholic, he was feeling a little more Catholic himself, a little more. But it was Pope John Paul, and it seemed like he was going to be Pope forever, honestly. But now, since then, we've had a couple other dudes, right? And the thing is, they're different. And whatever you want to say about the church being a two-headed monster, the popes, it's like, does anybody remember Pope Urban? Or, I mean, like average people, do you remember what Urban was up to? And Benedict the First? I don't know which Benedict that we currently have. No, we don't have Benedict, we have the other guy. Benedict retired real fast. He was like the shortest pope ever, as far as they were probably shorter, right? Ones that got assassinated or whatever. They're all different guys being pope. Pius, so the first, second, third, fourth, fifth, right? Gregory the Pope. There's all kinds of popes, and I couldn't tell you much about many of them. Innocent the third, Innocent the first, whatever. There was Innocents, and Gregory's, and Benedict's, and John Paul's, and whatever. You think Peter was a more popular name for a pope, since that's the role they're supposed to play. I'm sure there's been a Pope Peter, right? Other than the original Peter? Or is that kind of taboo? We don't take on the name of Peter. And that's the truth of it. That's where their problem is like they're all stuck on Peter. And that's the problem the Lutherans have. They're all stuck on Luther. They've got a permanent pope, really. It's Luther. He's pope over them not for life, but for eternity. As far as, I don't mean that literally. I just mean that in a hyperbolic sense. I'm exaggerating. And for all the generations, Luther is in charge of that church. And everything he said is what they do. Sort of. Except now, right? Just like the Catholic Church. It seemed like Peter was their leader for a while. We're going to carry forth the legacy of Peter. And it's hard to see that now. What would Peter think of the church today? What would Luther think of what's happened to the mainstream Lutheran denominations? The liberal ones. I would not. Luther? You kidding me? I doubt Luther would hold with much of what goes on. There's problems in denominations and their structures and in all that But the body of Christ goes on anyways. I believe in Ephesians 4:16. I believe it's true even now. The body increases to the edifying of itself in love. The body of Christ, whether it knows it or not, whether someone's paying attention or not, is producing the next generation of Christians, and it is also producing the prophets and apostles and teachers and etc. for the future. You know what I mean? I'm not formally part of any church, yet I am a product of the church. You know what I mean? The Catholics had their fingers in me. A little bit of Lutheran. I think I must have got... The thing is, I've been to a couple Lutheran services as an adult for funerals. And gosh, they seem familiar. And I think I have this sort of deep memory of attending a Lutheran church when I was very young. I think we attended one a few times. We mostly went to Catholic church, but we went to another church that I do recall. I'm like, oh, I remember being at a church like this. Because I remember my Catholic church very vividly. Because we went there a good number of times before I was 9. And I remember just the building very specifically. I remember other buildings. I remember I was in another Lutheran church of that style of architecture. I'm like, oh, this was the kind of Lutheran church they were building like in the 60s or something, or the 50s, I don't know when. A particular kind. So I remember it. But they influenced me, no doubt. And ultimately, I mean, in a small way. But I mean, the thing is, I was a teenager looking at my Bible. My father had an influence. He was a product of different denominations and influences. I had influences from the charismatic movement, which at first I rejected, actually. From splinter groups like the Shepherd's Chapel and Arnold Murray. Identity groups, crazy, crazy. I think it's crazy. Based on, as far as like the Christian identity thing, that everyone thinks that white folks are the Israelites. You know, we're the white Hebrew Israelites. I said, if you remember the black Hebrew Israelites were in the news. The white Hebrew Israelites are not much better. It's a racist ideology about, I don't know, like the New Testament says there's neither bond nor free nor Jew nor Greek in Christ, and then they're all up in arms about we're the real Jews. And it's just, we're the real Hebrews, the real Israelites, and I just got no time for that stuff. This I say, therefore, and testify in the Lord, that ye henceforth walk not as other Gentiles walk, in the vanity of their mind, having their understanding darkened, and being alienated from the life of God through the ignorance that is in them, because of the blindness of their heart, who being past feeling have given themselves over unto lasciviousness, to work all uncleanness with greediness. We have not so learned Christ. Okay. So the idea is that we are to the building up of each other. Edifying means building the house building. And literally, oikodome is two words. One for, it's like literally like one. A building is a house, but it's also a verb, right? And the other word is for house. Oikodome is literally house building. Edifying. I'm always seeing this structure I built. I used to have this bookshelf. It was a nice bookshelf. It belonged to my grandmother, right? But it was something she bought to fit into her home. And I built this to fit into my home, into our needs, very specifically. It's actually, it's funny because it's actually bigger because it holds more books. Though I didn't think that at first, but the way it's structured is actually has a greater capacity to hold. I built that, And by, and I built a lot of things. You see those, like, right behind, see those little white legs? Wait, right there. See that white leg? There's a desk back there. I built that to some desks for my kids for their schooling to sit at. There's other things I built that are off camera and can't be seen in the house. I built a lot of things in the house. I try to build up my house so that it works more efficiently, so that it is more to my liking. And the same thing with the house of God, the body of Christ. The believers themselves are built up and to be edified, to function better as Christians, and better in concert with one another. I don't always know what the concert is. You know what I mean? Like, I used to play in a band, not in my rock band, but the rock band would do actually for an example. But I was thinking of my time in elementary school. I played the trombone, and in the 7th and 8th grade we had the band. Well, we had a band thing we did. In grade school, I remember we used to go once a week on a bus and go to the junior high and have, like, band practice with all the other elementary school band kids. And in junior high, we were in the band, right? And I had a part. And we'd play a piece of music, and I'd have my part. I had my trombone part. And I never even saw the other parts of the other musicians, I didn't look at them. I didn't know what they were. I didn't know what they were supposed to be doing. But then we'd play together, and they'd do what they were supposed to be doing. I was doing what I was supposed to be doing, and the music would be made. So it is not necessary for me to have tabs on everybody else. Denominations are partly that, trying to keep tabs on everybody. The humans are obsessed with having things under control. And, there's some wisdom in that. It's not like, if you're starting to gather, like, I don't have to worry about it per se. People may worry about me. That's fine. Worry about me. We don't like this loose cannon going off, But I mean, people do worry about me, and people have tried to check me, and some have been successful. And like I've said about, like, Trinity, and for some people that may be like, oh, Paul, you fell there when you adopted that doctrine, when you finally just gave in to it. I still object to parts of, like, the nature of, like, the councils and all that to some degree, because, like, to decide for everybody, even for groups that you are not directly supervising, seems a bit much. The apostles were over all the church, and ever since then they've been looking for successors. One problem is, as time goes on, the structures that are created to select successors have become corrupted. And so we get men who ought not be considered successors to the apostles. They've, scrupulously weeded out men of zeal and ability. They've taken men from time to time of ability, of intellect, of, love of the things of God, no doubt. But they've also had men who are parasites in the church, who come in but to steal and to make merchandise of people. So, having all this in mind, and also remembering the main theme, which is walk worthy of the calling wherewith you are called, I testify in the Lord. Again, I beseech you, I testify in the Lord. He's not saying, in order to be saved, you must. But still, if you want to, it's like a test for you. Am I walking worthy of the calling? Am I respectful of what God has done for me? Am I respecting God? Respect is like a watered down idea of fear. Do I have respect for God, for what He's done, for His plans, for His desires for me? Is that something I'm even curious about? Am I obedient to Christ in any capacity? And that to the degree that is true or false, to the degree you look at your life and see whether or not that's going on, you measure where you are in the faith. And you could say, like, oh, I've been a Christian for 20 years, and I think I measure up to a newborn infant. That's a problem. You should be growing up into Christ. You don't have to be the measure of the stature of the fullness of Christ right now, even after 20 years, but you do necessarily are expected to be 100% Christ-like. But you ought to be more Christ-like than you were 20 years ago, right? I'm better at almost everything than I was 20 years ago. Except things like, my back isn't what it used to be. As far as moral things, I should have attained a greater morality. I should not be hardening myself to sin. But that's what happens to people. They walk in the vanity of their mind. Sometimes we can become better at sinning, better at justifying ourselves, set in our ways, allowing the vanity of our mind to take over. Vanity is often emptiness. Just like I said, when we say do something in vain, it means to no purpose, to no end. I'm going to quickly look up, confirm what this word means, vanity. Metaiotes. Vanity or emptiness. Okay. Alienated to estrange. Okay. All very straightforward. In fact, one of the parables Jesus gives is of he talks about when an unclean spirit has gone out of a man, he wanders through dry places, and he finding no place of rest, he says, I'll go back to my old home. And he returns to the person he was cast out of, and he finds it clean and swept, empty. And he says, "This is great. I'm going to bring with me 7 demons worse than myself." And so the last state of the man is worse than the first. This often happens when people try to reform their lives, but they don't fill it with a new something. I found this. I can't just cast out evil from me. It must be replaced with something good. There's an exchange often I have to make. Something that space occupied in my life. See, oftentimes sin is satisfying something in your life. This is something important to understand about sin. It is you often continue to sin because the sin stimulates pleasure centers in your brain, or it gives you a little dopamine hit, something like that. It can be one thing or even, sometimes people can be taught to associate pain with pleasure, but because the brain associates, it's using rewards, chemical rewards in your brain are being doled out based on your sense of fulfillment in any given thing you do. It gives you a little hit of this. I'm not a scientist, obviously, okay? I just know a little bit about the way the human mind works. And what I'm saying is, sin and stuff is rewarding certain pleasure centers in your brain. And you don't necessarily have to do a one-for-one trade, because you can just go from one sin to the other that way. But we got to understand, when you take something away, that you have to often, not always, but there often has to be something else there in its place. Something to take up that space in your life. And so we should fill our life. Here's the thing. It's like, but filling your life up with the things of God is not necessarily, it's like, how do you just love that? I really want my coffee. There we go. How do you do that? Again, it's like the commandment to love. It's such a I can perform the action of love. I can do outwardly, and sometimes that's a good start because it's like, you can pantomime the right thing until you feel it, and that's not most ideal, but it is a step in the right direction. When I've struggled against certain sins, it's like sometimes it's like I can't change how I feel inside of me. You know what I mean? I can't change the desires and stuff, at least not just change the inner man first. Out of the heart proceeds forth lust, envies, murders, strifes, all those things that come out of my heart. It's not easy to just change that, but I can try to amend my outward behavior, or at least shape my world around me to make it harder for me to do those things, or to fill my life up with other things. And they say idle hands are the devil's workshop. That's a proverbial saying, at least in English. And certainly, it's when you're really busy with things, there's not as much time to engage in a lot of the decadent sins that we do from having empty heads. If our minds are filled up with good things, even if it's not the things of God, it could be work or whatever, though we should fill our minds with the things of God as much as possible. But everyone's going to have a limited capacity of what they can focus on any one thing. Yeah, that's why an hour-long study like this is not for everyone. It's like a lot of people are not going to be able to, and if hey, you know what? Here's the thing. I repeat myself so often, you can just listen to half of it every day, and then, or whatever. I don't know. I'm not going to tell people how to use this, because as far as I'm concerned, it's none of my business how you use this, I realize I'm still stuck on this. I haven't switched back. How long have I been there? Vanity. Oh, yeah. And my engineering's a little slow on the uptake here. I've been mostly talking. So, our minds can be empty in many ways. That's just one way to look at it. I'm just saying, we have to fill our mind with the right thoughts so that we can walk the right walk. We don't want to be not giving heed to the things of God. Like our mind is not filled up with the things of God. And so our mind is void of those things. And so our understanding of the things that lead to life eternal, the light of Christ, is darkened. We have no understanding of these things. And we're alienated from the life of God by ignorance, blindness. And that's how people without Christ walk. They're not mindful of the things of God or of the light of Christ or of the life of God through the knowledge of Him. Right? And they're blind to it, and they will walk after those things. I think about, I know people whose youth was filled up with blindness and ignorance of the things. They like literally, because no one taught them really right from wrong. And they knew some right from wrong. But a lot of the vanity of the world, the emptiness, the empty pursuits, the things people pursue, the things young people pursue. I encountered this too. When I was young, it was like, hey, try drugs, and wouldn't you like to have sex? And, and all the world bombards you with imagery, and peers and people in the are all pushing you in that direction. That's like what, I remember, the funny thing is, I just remember I did not fit that well. I was exceedingly uncomfortable because of I have a very natural tendency towards shyness, which I overcame with just whatever, through my experiences. But I had a tendency towards, still when it comes to things like of Yeah, I'm glad I married young, because I'd hate to be stuck in the world of like trying to find romance. It's exceedingly uncomfortable, you know. And but the world is all like, oh, it's easy this and easy that, just how just you meet somebody and you start dating, and you start doing things you shouldn't be doing, but you're just trying to see, what maybe you're compatible or whatever, or it's just what people do. Their ignorance and their dark and their walk in blindness of the life they could have in Christ. And then they can't feel the loss. I remember that's what happened to me. Is like, the funny thing is, I kind of knew about the faith a little more than some people. Like, as far as I knew that there was something more to life than the pursuit of carnal pleasures. But I had bought into this idea that I should pursue those things, because they have their pleasures, right? Just like alcohol, sex, drugs, all those things, there is a reward in them. It's ultimately destruction, but at the time it seems pleasurable. Sort of the opposite of chastisement, which at the moment doesn't seem pleasurable. And I'm thinking about this being past feeling. Sometimes people are so embroiled in their immorality, they can't even feel the void of their lives. I felt that void, the emptiness of what I was going after. I felt it, as I knew that there was. I'm like, this isn't for me. There's got to be something better. This is so empty and so void of meaning. Like, I don't want this to be this. If this is my life, I'm not really interested. I don't want to live this life. And if we don't know, and and until the gospel comes, or something. The people without the gospel live other kinds of life other than sex and drugs and rock and roll and all that stuff. But those are also sometimes not, what is it then? Just work? Find a fulfilling occupation? Work. There is some fulfillment in hard work. It is a fulfilling thing to work and to struggle to survive, to exist, to raise a family. There's some worldly things that are more fulfilling than others and more upright than others, right? And so that is not really in this category, but it is not as ultimately fulfilling as the life you have in God. It doesn't quite complete the picture. There'll still be something a little missing. But in that sense, it's more treacherous in a way, just as when the wedding feast, the men were called to the wedding feast, and those who took it lightly said, they went one to his farm and one to his merchandise. They weren't. It was nothing particularly evil in what they were going after. It wasn't one to his prostitutes and one to his bar. It was one to his farm and one to his merchandise. They're just doing commerce and stuff and doing the normal activities of life. It can be more treacherous in a sense. It is less difficult to detect the emptiness. You can have a sense of fulfillment in those things, and those things are often a necessary part of life. But we should not, if we miss out on the calling of God because we're just too busy with the normal necessities of life, that's all the more the pity. But some people are even past feeling that when they're caught up in vanity, they don't even feel it as such. I've met people who they're old, and they're still caught up in the same vanity I was caught up when I was 19. You know what I mean? I mean, actually 18, I should say, because by the time I was 19, I was already starting to think I was out of this. I wanted out. I don't know if it was precise. It was like right around that time. I remember because it was when I shaved my head, and that was before Christmas. So it was around the time of my birthday in my first year at college that I was like, it was within that time frame that I started to get this sense. I think, I don't know. It's weird. No, I think so, because by then I was already alone. The friend I was rooming with had started staying at his dorm at his fraternity he was joining, and so I was alone at the dorm quite a bit. And it was interesting because it was the first time in my life I was really alone. Started to think of these things. And so I wanted to enter the priesthood. I thought that's what you did. Didn't start off anti anything. If we can't feel the emptiness of our lives, we end up giving ourselves over to lasciviousness. Lasciviousness. How much do I bet? I believe this is the word that is going to be defined in the dictionary as licentiousness, or hopefully not. That's what Strong did. I remember looking up lasciviousness in Strong's dictionary, or somewhere, and it was and the definition was licentiousness. And I looked up licentiousness, and the definition was lasciviousness. But let's see what the Greek word means, because they're a little different. Licentiousness means taking license, and lasciviousness is sort of, here again, look at, oh wait, sorry, I didn't bring it up for you. This is what I mean. It's always kind of funny when a word is defined by another word that's just as opaque. Sorry, I used a word that was opaque there. Opaque means non-transparent, meaning it's not easily seen what it is. And there I go. It is good, people may think, oh, it's so smart to use such big words. It's not really. To be a more effective communicator, you should use words that are easily understood. So my problem, it goes to my education and my depth of reading, but I never set out trying to have a big vocabulary. It's just something that happened to me. Don't try to expand your vocabulary, because it just, for one, it muddles my head. Sometimes I'm looking for the right. If you know too many words, you can't find the right word all the time. When you have simple words, you just go right to the simplicity of things. And maybe you don't seem as intelligent, I guess. But if your job is to communicate, you'll be a more effective communicator. So look at lasciviousness. Oops, wrong position. There we go. Oh, didn't tell me. Oh, there we go. Aselgia. Selgia, by the way, is, I believe, the word that, I want to look at that, is usually translated godliness. You notice it said licentiousness, wantonness? I usually think of lasciviousness in the sense of wantonness. Licentiousness is a little easier to understand. It means one who takes license. From aselgia, from aselgis, brutal. Properly violent spite, which rejecting restraint. I think that's the sense of what the word means. Properly means violent spite, which is interesting. I never encountered that, but maybe they think it means something different. Selgus apparently means continent. I'm just looking here. Filthy, lasciviousness, wantonness. So in classical Greek, but Paul spoke common Greek, so who knows? I like the idea of licentiousness. It's to do whatever. You know what I mean? To be lack of control brutal in a not just a physical sense but a metaphorical sense, meaning being, like let me explain what brutal is to me. Because I think of it in the way we would have used it when I was 18. That's brutal, man. Like oh, last night. This is the description of the night when I turned to God to spare my life because I thought I was going to die from too much drugs. Because last night I took 2 tabs of acid, and then I smoked about 6-foot bongs of weed. If you don't know what that is, it's like a giant 6-foot long tube through which you inhale. You like pull the thing full of smoke, and then they pull the thing out, and you take a breath real quick, and then you take a massive amount of cooled off smoke into your lungs. Hit 6 of those. I remember it was 6-foot bongs because everyone was like, brutal. They didn't say brutal, but I mean, I'm just giving you the context. That was brutal, man. 6-foot bongs on top of acid, and then I had a 6-pack of Little Mickey's cream ales, which is malt liquor, which is like each one of those is like 1.5 or it's like 2.5 beers each. I didn't get through all those, though, to tell you the truth. I think I got through about 4 of those. And on the 5th one, I took leave of I said goodbye to the people I was companioning with, and I went back to my room and laid down and thought, this is the end. Because I'd never felt so messed up in my entire life. My abuse of myself and the abuse of drugs in that moment was brutal. I was a brute, a beast. Remember those commercials about drugs where they say, we put a monkey in a cage and he could have all the cocaine he wants. I never tried cocaine. I'm glad I didn't, because I hear it's really addictive, right? Give him all the cocaine he wants, and expensive. Couldn't afford it. And the monkey took cocaine until he died. He just kept taking the cocaine because he liked it, right? That's what it means to be brutal. I just do it because I can until it kills, just like some dumb beast. It feels good, so do it. And then that way they worked all uncleanness with greediness. I'm greedy for the feelings. You know what I mean? Take all my money and waste it on these things, I worked a job at college basically to fund my drug use. I don't know what else I spent money on, to tell you the truth. You have not so learned Christ. Christ hasn't taught us to be this way. To work all uncleanness with greediness, to greedily lick up sin, like a dog licking up its vomit. That shameful yet irresistible urge they have. Dogs always look ashamed. I don't know if they have any shame, but sometimes people do. Only if they're not past feeling, though. Once you go past feeling, you don't feel shame anymore. You're not, I wasn't like that. I could sin to the point where I was ashamed of myself. I was always capable of doing that. I still felt, I was never I could never, because I always believed in God, and on some level I always thought he was watching me. And even though I was used to him just keeping quiet about it, my conscience was not utterly void of, it's just, and, there was always, I was always tempted to sin, but never able to sin to the degree that the temptation wanted me to. Because there were things I couldn't do, places I couldn't go, men I could not be. And in some ways, it made me always actually think of myself in terms of being, like, I don't really think of myself as I was this great sinner. I was kind of a pathetic sinner. You know what I mean? I didn't have the, in some ways, I thought it admirable to just go and do. You know, I know it isn't. But, like, you know, if you want to do it, just do it then. Give yourself over to it. This whole standing between the two things, the pathetic nature of standing between righteousness and godliness and not being able to go either way, you know, made me think of the lukewarm passages in Revelation, which I was familiar with from my youth. And I despised that lukewarmness, you know, of I love God, but I sin. You know, I love God, but I love my fornication. I despise that. And so, you know, I've always walked around with the burden of being humiliated by my own sins, of being ashamed, of being feeling, even without people knowing about it, feeling that way. Which is, you know, whatever. It's like, I used to feel differently about it. Now I just take it for what it is. It's less of a burden now, because through that, being able to feel shame, you know, I mean, like, you know, like when I overeat, when I have overeaten at times, you know, the greediness of, like, going after, I don't know, like, you ever been? I've been to places like pizza parties. You know, they have all you can eat pizza, right? I've always been able, I don't know how big I look on the screen. I mean, I'm not vastly overweight right now at all by any means. And I haven't been the whole time I've been doing this, you know, but I got up there. I was up at 270. You know, I'm almost 6'3". I'm very big boned, as they say. But also, I overate a bit, you know, on a regular basis, a little bit overeating. So I slowly gained weight. But I could really put it away, you know what I mean, if I wanted to on occasion. And I'd go to a pizza party for whatever, you know, sometimes we have them for our sports team. Sometimes there'd be for other activities. There'd be all-you-can-eat pizza. Or I'd go to Pizza Hut even and all-you-can-eat pizza. It's less troublesome there, because I'm in a strange place with strangers and nobody's paying attention. And I wasn't so ashamed in front of my family, but in front of strangers, like how many times I went back for pizza. You know what I mean? Meaning, the pizza's been out there for a while. Everyone's eating pizza. I'm still going back for fifths and sixths. But at the same time, I'm too ashamed to take all that I want on the first trip, which is like, I don't know, one of these whole things. Give me just a full 8 slices, at least. And then I'll see about seconds. You know what I mean? But you ever been ashamed of that? You know, like where you're like, I hope nobody's paying attention to how much I'm eating. Because why? Because it's the greediness. You know? There's a lot of other analogies I could make besides that. There's a lot of greed in the human heart after things that give pleasure. Things that give pleasure, we get greedy for it. We want more. More pleasure. I just want to fill my life with pleasure. You know, but it is more pleasurable, ultimately, to have a fulfilling life. You know what I mean? To do good and to accomplish things and to be productive and help other people will make you feel better about yourself. It won't give you the immediate reward that a lot of sins do. Sin gives an immediate reward, and afterwards you feel like garbage. Unless you're past feeling, in which case you feel like doing more sin. Right? Like, I better go do some more because the good feelings have worn off. I don't feel shame, but I do feel, but you know what I mean? But I need to go do more, because that's what it does. You have to go do more. Got to go have some more. Or I could just feel like, you know, That's how people become alcoholics. It's like because, especially the most severe form of alcoholism, where people are drunk all the time. Now, I remember when I was in school, they were trying to sell us alcoholism in terms of people like binge drinking on the weekend might be alcoholics. People, having one or two drinks every night might be alcoholics. And maybe so, because often that one or two drinks a night is a lie. One or two drinks a night is actually 5 to 6 drinks a night, but in one or two glasses. It's like it's 5 to 6 or 8 or 9 servings of alcohol in one or two trips to the home bar or whatever you want to call it. I don't know what they call it. The liquor cabinet. That's the word. Only 2 trips to the liquor cabinet. So that's 2 drinks. But I'm taking the equivalent alcohol of maybe like 8 or 10 servings, right? So that's no good. Two bottles of wine. 2 drinks a night. So, what was I getting at? Yeah. Alcoholism, we got sold it as this sort of minimalist view, because it's like, I don't doubt there are some people whose consciences will allow them to have 1 or 2 drinks every day or a glass of wine with their dinner. I don't do that because it's just too treacherous for me. I thought I could do that at some point, and it developed into more than that. That's how I have that knowledge. 1 or 2 drinks can be, pretty soon it's 8 or 9, but it's still kind of in 2. It's like the drinks just get bigger and bigger. And so it's not good. And I'm not saying that for everyone that's the case, but for me it was, and for many people it is. Okay, for a lot of people, don't kid yourself. If it's you, it's you. That's you. You're not. I don't care. You don't have to fool me. I don't know. I'm not going to check up on you, but this is your walk. You got to be concerned about it. We want to be sober-minded. It's many things. Like I said, it's a matter of conscience on some level, but don't let your don't harden yourself and deceive yourself in your mind. But I didn't realize that there was a form of alcoholism, like I said, the most severe kind, where it's like you wake up in the morning and you've got a hangover, and so to get rid of the hangover, you start drinking again, and then they end up being at least buzzed or drunk all day. I didn't really think that was possible. I think I did that once or twice in college, but it was just way too crazy. I thought it was this is just insane. It was just a little too out of the, I don't mean to get on anybody, but it was, if you're living that, you probably know I can't keep living like this. This will totally destroy me. And it does, it destroys you. You know what I mean? I was like, because I know actually when I was doing a lot, I understood, I was holding out through the day, but I knew by the time I got to the end of the day, man, I really wanted that drink at the end of the day. I wanted those drinks, and I wanted to get well and thoroughly buzzed at the end of the day as a reward for making it sober all day. I didn't really, in the morning, I managed to studiously avoid hangovers by drinking a ton of water. I was very careful about that because I knew it was number one thing was dehydration. So I just drink water at the end of the evening, right after all that. And so if I had to get up to go to the bathroom 3 times, I'd drink more water. It's better than feeling like the world is crashing down on your head. But there's other ways to kill it. They get up and they drink more, right? And it's not always a question of just, sometimes they know they have a problem, all right? But sometimes, in some things, we don't know we have a problem because we're past feeling. If you know you have a problem, that's good. That means you're not past feeling. If you feel guilty about your sins, that's good because you're not past feeling. You're not walking as other Gentiles walk. You can still feel. You haven't become numb and insensitive to sin. And that's a good thing. You know, a lot of times in this world, they want you to just feel good about sin. You know what I mean? Like, you think about it, like I was saying, like, people become so decadent. You know, and you know, a generation ago, people were way too concerned with, like, their lives and stuff to be all caught up in all the immorality we have today. Because as we grow more rich and more decadent, we become more concerned with silly things. You know, with things that are not profitable, with with what I like to do. You know, people's sexual peccadillos and all that becomes so prominent in our lives that people are basing their whole identities around them. They want a sad life that where your identity is caught up in your whatever hole there is in your soul that you think you got to fill with some sort of sexual thing. I mean, I don't define my identity as a human being is not entirely caught up in, it's certainly not headlined with the fact that I'm a heterosexual male. That's just like, I hated even saying that. You know what I mean? Like, my role as husband, if I define myself as a husband, I'm not really even thinking of that. I'm thinking of the love that binds us in and actually the real things that I do as a husband and father, and the things I fulfill, the role I fulfill in the Lord in that capacity. Because primarily I identify as a Christian. That's my identity. I identify as a Christian. Pronoun, you know, whatever. This is not the way it is of Christ. Okay, so we got plenty of verses for tomorrow. So we finished. We got up to verse 20. We're gonna pick up with 21, where it's gonna. You have not heard so in Christ. Well, what have you learned in Christ? What have you been taught in Christ? That is what we will talk about in the next study tomorrow. And I look forward to being here then.
Verily, verily, I say unto you, whosoever committeth sin is the servant of sin, and the servant abideth not in the house forever, but the Son abideth forever. If the Son therefore shall make you free, ye shall be free indeed. I know that ye are Abraham's seed, but ye seek to kill me, because my word hath no place in you. I speak that which I have